but to bring into the game usable and operational formations which on the corps level or division level can be plugged in. And it is this following a deliberate planning process, and it's very helpful.
General, thank you. And finally, General Mike?
Yeah, so I agree. We've got a great mutual training support structure with a number of nations that have chosen to specialize in some areas. So you mentioned the Czech Republic. We benefit from their CBRN capabilities. So I think that there's value. I actually think we've got to go back to NATO's plans, the family of plans, the alignment of troops to task, and the opportunities there for nations to offer the capabilities they're choosing to invest in to meet the requirements of the plan. We've always got to go back to the plan now. But I think there's value in it. I think some nations may not have the choice other than to specialize. And I think organizations like ours and other corps would welcome some capabilities that perhaps we're not as privileged or fortunate enough to benefit from nationally as well.
General, thank you very much. By my watch, we have 1 minute, and I promised that we'd end on time. I don't think I'm analytically capable of summing up something so complex as the European estimate within that time. I just note that we have 3 very important national views, but 3 views of an alliance of 32 allies. What I'd like to say to the generals on the panel is thank you for being very honest, and also notable not just in terms of this final panel, but I think the RUSI Land Warfare Conference this year in general is it's very clear that we're not just thinking about the problem, we're doing things, we're delivering, and I know you've got a very challenging time ahead on that, so thank you very much for your time.
Welcome to this final session of Land Warfare Conference, and can I begin by thanking CDS not only for attending our conference at this very busy time, but for his consistent support for RUSI over his entire tenure. This session will be entirely off the record. Admiral Sir Tony Radakin is well known to most of you. After a distinguished career in the Royal Navy, laterally as First Sea Lord, he became Chief of Defence Staff in 2021, and I think it's fair to say that it must be one of the most eventful tenures of any holder of that post for quite a significant number of years. 4 Prime Ministers, 2 American presidents, and 2 major regional conflicts now raging on a scale which the world has rarely seen in decades. And both of those conflicts are likely to be transformative for their respective regions, and both, as many of this conference's speakers have discussed, are acting as ruthless trials of military doctrine, of military technology, both old and new. And a vital part of your job throughout that period has been to provide advice to the Defence Secretary, to the Prime Minister, on our military's role in responding to both those wars as they evolve. But you've also been central to efforts to ensure that our armed forces rise to the challenge of transforming themselves in response to the more dangerous international environment we now face, but also to respond to the lessons those conflicts are providing. And I think, as this conference has demonstrated rather well, that process of transformation in the British Army is well underway, but it has a long way to go. and we welcome your leadership in that regard, and we welcome the remarks that you're about to make for this conference. So, CDS, over to you.
So thank you, Malcolm, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm very conscious, last year the backdrop was a war in Europe. This year the backdrop is war in the Middle East. Can I just reassure you, I have no plans to come to this conference next year. So, and before I start, I just want to say a massive thank you to the Army. Thank you to Rowley and the senior leadership, but to the whole of the Army for what you're doing. Because the way that you are grasping the NATO first mantle, the way that you are grasping modernization, your commitment to all of our allies and partners, I think is the leading light in terms of UK defence and what we need to do and what is happening. I read General Rowley's speech. I agree with everything that CGS says, and I've read some of the notes that have come from Commander Field Army, which are proof of things happening. And it's much stronger than where we were a year ago. That's a massive effort. And I really appreciate that as CDS so that we can use that to provide more choice for our government and reassurance to the Defence Secretary that we're delivering on the government's agenda. But I genuinely mean it when I say thank you for what it is that you're doing and the tone of all that's being achieved. I'll speak for about 10 minutes and then open it up to questions. I've got three main points. The peace dividend is over. This is an era change. It's profound. It's as much about the financial, the industrial, the societal aspects as it is the military aspects. The second one is that we are going to be okay. We are going to be okay because of the extraordinary security construct that we have, and we should have the confidence and self-assuredness to take our people with us and to give them that certainty that they will remain safe. And the third one is delivery. Now that we have a defence review, now that we have that clarity about the threats that we face, the role that we have to place ourselves into, it's about getting on with it in the way that the British Army is. The first one I'll touch on is that era change. This is not a bump in the road. War in Europe, conflict in the Middle East, the collusion of Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, which is much stronger than any of us anticipated and has happened more quickly than we forecast. The fact that we're now in a third nuclear age, the clarity of America focusing on homeland defense and its responsibilities in the Indo-Pacific, and an America that is incredibly candid in saying that Europe is going to have to do more for our continent, and that America will retain the nuclear guarantee for us, but the conventional role is going to fall on our shoulders. And then I think we also have additional clarity in terms of the SDR and what that's asking us to do, an emphasis on nuclear, on NATO first, on modernization, on being stronger in terms of embracing technology and innovation. Some of those lessons, whether it's what we're seeing Israel doing or our friends in Ukraine. The clarity that the SDR says in terms of a world that is becoming more dangerous and the need for our armed forces to be stronger. And then that's being backed up by government. So whether that's the additional funding we're getting or just completely different language to anything that I've seen in my career. A Prime Minister who speaks of a defence dividend and that defence is bringing a unity of purpose to the nation and to his government. A Chancellor who talks about the UK becoming a defence industrial superpower. These are enormous shifts, and they're ones that we should welcome. And that's ahead of that enormous conversation that's happening next week with the NATO summit, and where does NATO go particularly in terms of its new financial ambition. So this is an era change, and the thing about era changes is that they are with us for decades. And that's the way that I've spoken on previous RUSI lectures, and that's the way that I see it now. And a shift that this won't be instant. This is something that we will have to grow into as we get that additional resource during the 2030s. And then if I go to my second theme, that we're going to be okay, and people then accuse me of being complacent, it's just the fact that we are the beneficiaries of a security construct where the UK is a nuclear power, we're in NATO, and we continue to have America as our principal ally. And Europe is responding, $600 billion extra in spending since 2014, and now going to be spending even more than that over the next decade. NATO getting stronger, growing from 30 to 32, and looking to have an increasing overmatch against a dangerous Russia. And Russia is dangerous in terms of its malevolence and its ambition, but Russia is also weak. Last year, Russia gained 0.5% of territory in Ukraine for the loss of 420,000 killed and wounded. We're halfway through this year. Russia's gained about 0.25% for about 200,000 killed and wounded. And we should recognize that and the strengths and attributes that we have. And then the piece to me in terms of our confidence is that we should be confident that our strategy within NATO of deterrence is working. Russia is deterred. Russia does not want a war with NATO. Russia does not want a nuclear war. Russia is not going to strike against NATO nations because of our strength and our confidence, and that we are getting even stronger. And then I'll jump to my third point, and that is about the SDR and that theme of delivery. And for me, the SDR confirmed some of the ambition that's already in UK defence. The ambition to strengthen the British Army as part of the most substantial recapitalisation programme across our three services. The need to continue with the investment in nuclear, and that's enormous investment because we're renewing the nuclear warhead, we're renewing the SSBM fleet, we also have increased ambition through the AUKUS programme. And then it's continued ambition in terms of high technology and being able to win in the air with that ambition for a sixth-generation fighter. And then it's also identified some areas where we need to be stronger. Our offer and our leadership to the people in our organisation and looking after you better than we have been. The need to embrace an industrial relationship where we can use the technology and innovation in a much stronger way than we have been. And then it's also about a relationship with society where we don't want to scare our society. We don't want to do Putin's business, but we do have to reflect to our society that there are security concerns and that society is going to have to lean into making our armed forces stronger and making our society more resilient. And then if I focus on the army, I think it's clearer than it has been for a long time that we need an army that provides the Strategic Reserve Corps, and that's that core headquarters, it's both divisions. It's an army that has to improve its lethality, improve its mobility and its ability to respond, but also an army that needs to retain its confidence to be a leading army in Europe, both in terms of the ability to act, but also the ability to innovate and shape and to reflect how quickly we can shift from an army that is several generations too old and needs to accelerate to be a fifth-generation army. And then for me, the other piece is, when I say that the army's getting on with it, is to reflect so many of the things that you're doing. The fact that you now have 34 major programs which will spend over 45 billion in the next decade. The fact that between now and 2027, you will bring into service almost 1,000 new armoured vehicles. Those are massive changes. The Project Asgard and leading the way on that. 3,000 drones, 900 simulators delivered to units by August, and the ambition to double that in the next couple of years. And then some of the other sort of the standard Army equipment sets that are now starting to be provided to the Army, which I acknowledge we have been too slow in providing, and we need to continue that momentum and strengthen it over time. And that's really, because I want to leave time for questions, that's all I wanted to say in terms of prepared remarks. I thought I was going to be speaking from Paris, so I just had some bullets. But my main point is that one of saying thank you for what it is that you're doing, and that you're leading the way in terms of that drive to innovate and to modernize, and to maintain that confidence and to push the boundaries even further and more strongly. And then to recognize this is an era change, the peace dividend is over. We should be confident that we're going to be okay and we can respond to the threats and challenges out there. And that third one is we now deliver and get on with it. Thank you very much.
As you all prepare your questions, perhaps I could just ask a couple of my own to start with. I mean, very interestingly, you talked about the collusion between China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran as an important feature of our age. But it's quite striking, isn't it, over the last few days, how little Russia appears to be supporting Iran. They appear, at least to be leaving Iran out to dry. Is that a misperception, or how would you read that relationship?
No, so I think that's entirely true. And again, back to that theme of just acknowledging that Russia it's adjusted its economy to a wartime economy. It's making all those demands on its society. But yeah, the other aspects, the geopolitical shifts of the catastrophe for Russia of having gone into Ukraine and what it's provoked in Europe. I think the other big event was Syria and the pressure that Russia is under to try and maintain that toehold in the Mediterranean. Most of us have only ever known a Russia that tends to be in the Mediterranean, and it's struggling to stay there. And the disappointment of Assad and others when Russia let them down. And then you're seeing it again with Iran. So if you go back to last year, there was a fanfare of a deal between Russia and Iran. You now see Iran saying, can we draw on that deal? And Russia saying, absolutely no way, because Russia's under its own pressure. But Russia doesn't want to get entangled in that way in the Middle East. We've got to be clear and focused on seeing Russia for what it is, dangerous, but it's not something that we should be fearful about, and we need to manage the danger of Russia by getting stronger, but not doing Putin's work for him and making our own population afraid.
Very good. So, and more of an operational question. In the last days, in this exchange between Iran and Israel, this has been a war of the air. But history suggests, to get to a conclusion, ground forces in the end have to engage, or not.
Yeah, no. So I don't know about. So I've referred on other speeches to what Israel did last October. So on a single evening, effectively on one sortie of fifth generation aircraft, less than 100 munitions, and it took down, it principally took down Iran's major air defenses. It set up the ability for the operations that we've seen in the last week or so. I'm wary of, it's all about air power, it's all about, everything behind the use of that air power does speak to what we would call an integrated force and a multi-domain approach. You then have those operators on the ground that were also contributing to some of the assassination operations or taking out their sort of exquisite IAD systems. I think that's it's always going to be that way. It's always going to be a blend. I think the job of us as senior military professionals is normally being able to give our politicians choice, and to give politicians choice, you need to open up the whole panoply, and that involves all domains. And there might be a leading domain at a certain phase of the war, but I think for me, it's all elements. And you've seen an SDR that has sort of emphasised a UK continued approach, which is multi-domain, and options to say, right, because of our geography, let's focus on maritime and air, and big Europe will deal with armies. No, we need a stronger army. Chris Cavolius Sakure could not be clearer than expecting the UK to be providing a core headquarters and 2 divisions at least, because he judges us as the 6th largest economy, as a P5 nation, and as a nuclear nation. And it's regardless of his operational plans, it's almost what kind of nation are you? And that's the minimum that he would expect of us. And I think we all agree with that. It's the same. Can we have aircraft carriers that have got jets on board? Is the other demand. And which I think is pretty reasonable. And can we have an air force that is still got an ambition for 6th gen, as well as some of the other attributes that you can have with your drones flying alongside your jets, and the UK leading on that in that way.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Right, let's throw it open. Yes, please, right in the middle at Johnny Beale. Have you got? Well, let's just get you the microphone.
CDS, I understand you have just been to a Cobra meeting, and you probably can't talk about details of what was discussed, but
I've got a couple of months left.
All the more reason,
I could be fired tomorrow.
Can you just tell us what's going through your mind at the moment about your concerns about the situation in the Middle East, about protecting British military personnel in the region, British interests in the region, and are you worried that the US will join in this military action?
So thank you. I'm not going to stray into talking about hypothetically what America will do. So I think we have strengthened our ability to protect both our people in the region, our responsibilities with coalition bases, our responsibility with our partners and allies in the region. So that's what you're seeing. The bit that you're not seeing is the international element. So the conversations that go on with America to understand American thinking and how they're providing additional defensive support in the region. This sounds arrogant, the privileged position that you have in the UK. It was my predecessor, Nick Carter, that established the Dragon Group, which is the UK chairing a group of the Middle East Chiefs of Defence. We meet a couple of times a year. I had a VTC with them on Saturday afternoon, having had conversations with them on the Friday, again to get their sense of what's going on in the region. What are their concerns? How can we contribute? How can we learn from them as to what's going on? So this is a collective international effort to ensure that our people are protected in the region when so much is going on. And it's also a reassurance to a British Prime Minister that we're doing that, and we're doing that in concert with our international allies, and that we are staying close to them so that depending on how things unfold, that we're aware of as to how things might go. And that's all that's going on at the moment.
Right, I have a gentleman here with a red tie.
One last one. Hello, Luc Marchand, no particular affiliation. Just one point stood out to me in your speech when you mentioned that Russia is deterred. And it surprises me because the conflict that we are here discussing so much right now is the product of 8 years of a failure to deter. Russia has not been deterred. It's actually attempted sabotage operations on British soil. So it's clearly not deterred now. Are you sure, now that the public is finally waking up to the need for a robust defense, that it's time to tell everyone don't be afraid, that things are all right? Are you sure things are all right? Thank you very much.
So thank you. I think we have to make the distinction between deterrence and the effectiveness of deterrence for NATO and the dilemma that Ukraine has had. And you're right to point out that this isn't something that started in February 22. And the way that I describe it, and when we shouldn't skip over the security construct that we have, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way to Ukraine, it's just to reflect it's everything that Ukraine craves. So the importance of collective security, the importance of being a nuclear power, and if you're not a nuclear power, then you probably want to have a nuclear friend, and then the criticality for most nations of being close to America and the power that America still projects in the world. And then you're right to point out that yes, there have been sabotage operations by Russia throughout Europe. But if you look at what's going on in terms of a Russian aggression and the way that is being stymied by Ukraine, and Ukraine is being helped by European help and others, that I don't think, if we were back in Staff College 4 years ago, I think most of us would be surprised at how limited the Russian response has been. And that, to me, is a reflection of the inability of Russia and the success of our intelligence agencies, the success of our posture, so as to ensure that that sabotage is incredibly minor. It's something that we can sustain and deal with, and it's something that we can respond to if we have to in a much stronger way. And that's what I mean in terms of the way that Russia has been contained to the fight that it's in primarily, and this hasn't been something that is spread in a way that some of us may have anticipated if we'd been viewing it in the past.
Okay, other questions? Right at the back there, please. Yes.
Thank you, Deborah Haynes from Sky. Just sort of following on from Johnny Beale's question, predictably, and obviously it's off the record, could you give any sense of whether the UK is considering supporting the US if Donald Trump does decide to take action against Iran? And if you don't want to go there at all, though please do, could you give a sense, next week is obviously the NATO summit, how likely is it that all allies, including the UK, are going to sign up to this 5% defence spending pledge, and within what timeline? Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Deborah. So the way it feels to me, and what I think will be consistent all the way through this, is predominantly the support that the UK is providing to that force protection for our people that are out in the region, the responsibility that we have to our coalition partners, and the bases and the interests that we've all got in the region, and that support to especially our partners and allies that we've got in the region, again, to reassure them that in this war that's unfolding, that the UK is there and it's doing the best thing possible to protect them and their interests, and to try to soften any of the impact on what is a conflict at the moment, and depending on how that might unfold. I don't want to go into any more detail other than that, please. And then on your NATO question, there's an element of we only have to wait another week and then we'll see. But the mood music is an expectation that NATO is going to make again a huge leap and have 5% at its core, and 3.5% of that being on defence and security. That will have to. I don't want to get ahead of leaders and their decisions next week, but if you link that to my comments about an era change, that is huge in terms of what is happening and how we're responding to these geopolitical challenges. And I worry that because there's been, and you and other journalists have helped with the conversation, and the conversation is so out there and common, that we start to normalize that. It's not. It's extraordinary what is happening, and then we need to get behind that and ensure that our governments and our people get the benefit of those enormous shifts that are emerging.
I think we have now run out of time, I'm afraid, but thank you so much for those really enlightening responses to the various questions we've had. And just to finish us off, I'm going to ask CGS to make some final remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm conscious that I stand between you and London's fabled, brilliant transport system. So you really got something to look forward to when you step out the door. So let me conclude by thanking all of you who have made the conference over the last few days such a success. I don't think Jack Watling needs any more praise from us, but I'll give it to you anyway, as well as to the team at RUSI, and importantly those staff here at Church House, as well as to the innovators who have joined us, as well as the sponsors who have made this possible, and to our own Army Comms and Engagement team who have facilitated. To the 17 Army Chiefs who have been here and the 54 countries represented, thank you so much for coming. It makes such a difference and it means a lot to us. So I won't try and summarise what we covered over the last 2 days, but there were three, and it's always three, isn't it? This is the sort of sentiment that has generally, we have felt, has landed and resonated most as a consequence of this conference. So really, first to Chris Donohue's point from this morning, it's really simple. We know the problem. We know our part in NATO's plans. They've been explicit. We know what needs to be done and what we need to build. From a position of strength, we are going to get stronger for the reasons that you say, CDS. We just need now to get on with it. And your point is, Chris, this has got to be real within 24 months. That's not to say it's over in 20 more months, but unless something is materially different, then we won't have got ourselves into that stronger position. So I think hopefully that's exactly what we are getting on with, and we want to help and share what we're doing if it's of relevance. The second, of course, is that no matter what the tech inflections are of the day, and we've had wonderful conversations about drones here, additive, are they here to stay, is there something? At the end of it, as it always has been, as it always will be, and as it is today, it's the soldiers who make the heart of our fighting system work or not. And they do remain the competitive advantage, and they are our point of difference, and quite rightly so, as senior leaders, they are the focus for us. Because certainly in the British Army's case, it is often the most inexperienced and the youngest and the most junior who carry the greatest risk in the combat environment. And we owe them everything we can to do to make it as easy as possible for them to do a very, very dangerous, difficult thing on behalf of the nation. Thirdly, I think the sort of one of the star turns was Bobby Vedrell giving us his masterclass on understanding the role of capital markets and the importance of understanding how we diversify funding for a defence industry which, who knew, is now really trendy. So to the point there, it is not just about the percentage point of GDP that is spent by NATO. It's how we can shape that reform of the capital markets to ensure that the money is patient, it stays, and it's correctly allocated for the long haul where this has to go. And also the importance and the role we've got is to make it as easy as possible for our defence sectors to grow in a safe way, and so on and so forth. So thank you. Those are the three key points that have sort of resonated most from the feedback. So let me finish very quickly with trailing two events, if I may. The first, Chris didn't say it, but he's asked me to do it, is just to remind you the next super cool gathering of this trendy organisation of ours is the Conference of European Armies, which takes place 14th to 15th of July, and more importantly is the Land Euro event that follows, which is really bringing the very best of industry, as well as finance, as well as practitioners to bear. And that's where you want to show, for the benefit of everybody else, what all the core commanders have seen, which is this visualization of what we have got to be able to do in the context of European defence and security. And then more closer to home for us, the Army Expo 2025. We're on the move. We're going to do it in Edinburgh. We're going to coincide it with the Fringe, which is the draw, but more importantly with the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo. If you want an immersive event about who we are, what we do, and where we're going, please come along to the Army Expo. So let me finish where I started. Thank you, safe travels, and please let's do this again soon.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.